So what I want to do is look at the history, but start actually from the beginning. And the beginning is where the beginning happens to be in the book of Exodus, where it first talks about matzah. So, okay, well, I gotta go back and get it on my screen. There we are. So very quickly here, here we are. Okay, so this is in the book of Exodus, chapter 12, right before the 10th plague. Right before the 10th plague, Moses gives people the command to put the blood on the doorposts and sets out what this last meal before they leave is going to be. So it talks about this month shall be this month shall mark for you the beginning. So Passover, the month of Nisan, is actually the first month of the year. Rosh Hashanah comes in the 7th month in the year. Just a little bit of history there. And he talks about just take a lamb, take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household. If the household's too small, you can share your lamb and stuff like that. Purely, and they watch it for 4 days. It's a year-old male. They watch it for 4 days and then they sacrifice it. All right. Take the blood, put it on the doorpost, and in which they're to eat. And then it says, you shall eat the flesh, you shall eat the meat that same night. You shall eat it roasted over fire with unleavened bread. And in Hebrew, it's matzot and bitter herbs. So before they left Egypt, they were eating matzah based on the text. Now, afterwards, when they leave Egypt, it does say there's a whole thing about that when they left, they made the you know the story. They left, the bread didn't rise, and so then we had matzah. So the matzah. The matzah is actually mentioned twice. One before they left Egypt, and right after they left Egypt. So the question is, if we ate matzah before we left, what was the big deal afterwards? And why are we eating it during Passover? It makes, so what you're going to find is that these verses in the Torah were important. They set the tone. And then the rabbis and our teachers, our sages in the Talmud and through the Midrash as well, and through commentary, end up in a different place. It kind of shows how Judaism has evolved. So at the very beginning of the Seder, we read, and this was the first thing on your, oops, let me just get this up here. Okay. We read the halakha. This is after you go Kadesh, the first thing you do is you do the blessing over the wine. Orchatz, you wash, you're washing your hands. Then you do the karpas, the dipping of the vegetable, the parsley, whatever you use in salt water. Then you do the magid, which starts off, then you break the middle matzah. Then you start off with the magid, which is the story of the Exodus. And it starts off with an Aramaic phrase, halachma anya. This is the first paragraph in pretty much any Haggadah you use, whether it's the 30-minute version, whether it's the full version, it doesn't matter. And it's a halachma anya di achlu, and it's a great tune, by the way, if you don't know the tune. This is the bread, halachma anya. This is the poor man's bread. Anya is the word for poor. This is the bread of oppression, the poor man's bread, di achalu ahavtana, that our fathers ate, be'arad de mitzrayim, that they ate in the land of Egypt. Yeah, that's kind of an important concept when it says in the land of Egypt. But the question is da mitzrayim, does it mean in the land, or it just means when they left? That's a translation problem. Kol dichlin, everyone who's hungry, yetei v'yechol, everyone who's hungry can come and eat. Kol ditzrich, everyone who is in need, yetei v'yifsach, will join us for Passover. Now the question is, this word in Hebrew, v'yifsach, does it mean will join us for the Passover holiday or join us for the Passover sacrifice? Because the word Passover in the Bible refers to the Passover sacrifice. Not, it says there's 7 days, there shall be 11, we eat matzah and stuff like that. But in the holiday in the Torah is actually called Zaman Chirutenu, the festival of our freedom, or Zaman, or Chag HaMatzot, holiday of matzah. Doesn't really talk about Pesach as the name of the holiday, but God passed over, so that's kind of like where it comes from. So the question is does the word V'yifsach actually mean the Passover holiday or something different? Then it says, Hashata Hacha, now we are here. L'shana haba baradi Israel, and the next year we'll be in the land of Israel. Hashata Abded, now we're slaves. L'shana haba b'nei chorin, next year we'll be free. So this is the opening paragraph. And it is, in modern Haggadot, it's translated basically as the invitation to everyone. We're inviting people that are hungry to come to our land. But the way the rabbis look at it, were very different. So there was a commentary, and this is a 20th century commentator, so this isn't like, thousands of years ago. So this, it's by a guy named Rabbi Baruch Epstein. He authored a book called Torah Mamimah, which is very extensive. It's a commentary on the entire Torah and stuff like that. It's like in the Haggadah. So he says at the beginning, this is the bread of haste, which is halachma anya. He doesn't translate it as the bread of anya as poor. He says it's the bread of rushing, which our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. But he says not the bread of affliction, but the bread of haste. Matzah was the food that people ate when they were liberated, not while they're enslaved. So he disagrees. He says they didn't eat it while they were in Egypt. While most commentators associate matzah with slavery and oppression, Rabbi Epstein believes that it is more closely connected with Israel's liberation. The Israelites did not eat matzah in Egypt. In fact, and he uses another verse in the Bible, the book of Numbers, chapter 11, verse 5, when the Israelites tell Moses that the food in Egypt was plentiful. Remember, we had fish to eat in Egypt, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. And there's no mention of matzah in this verse. So from that, Epstein says, see, they didn't eat matzah in Egypt, which is probably true if you think about it, because maybe the only time they ate matzah is when Moses told them. It's a possibility. When the Haggadah says they ate lechem oni, and that's what lachma anya is, lechem oni, poor man's bread, it does not mean literally in Egypt, but rather in the vicinity where the vicinity of Egypt where people left the land. So he's arguing that they didn't eat the matzah in Egypt. So if they didn't eat the matzah in Egypt, or just in the vicinity, what did they do? And why are we saying this? Why do we say that they did? So he says this actually means something different. So now he's talking about this part here, that all who are hungry come and eat, and all who are needy come and celebrate Passover. He says that while these two statements sound repetitive, he says they contain two different types of invitations. The first statement is for those suffering from hunger, while the second statement is for those who have food but lack the necessary provisions to celebrate Passover. Rabbi Epstein understands the second statement to be an invitation to join in the celebration of the holiday. Vayifsach is not a reference to the Passover offering, which is the original translation, but rather a verb formed from the proper noun Pesach, meaning to celebrate Passover. We find a basis for this interpretation in Maimonides' version of the Haggadah, where he says, Kol ditzich lifasech, that Maimonides translates it differently, and he says it is Kol ditzich, that we all celebrate lifasech to the holiday. We're all celebrating the holiday itself. I know I'm dealing with Hebrew and Aramaic, but it's translated anyone who needs to celebrate Passover. Furthermore, the continuation of this statement in the Haggadah makes it clear that this is a reference to the festival and not the Passover offering, since it says, this year we are here, which would refer to the diaspora. Keep in mind, this paragraph was written during the Mishnaic times, or the late Mishnaic time, which was about around the year 200, when we're under Greco-Roman occupation. And under Roman occupation, you got to remember that, well, very quickly, let me stop this real fast. Anybody know what a Roman meal was like? When Rome had these huge meals, and you saw pictures of people being fed grapes, and stuff like that. What in your memories? Where were people sitting when they were being fed the grapes?
On the floor with pillows or something?
The floor with pillows, okay, or on a couch, but they were kind of like leaning back. almost like reclining.
Mm.
That's where that question comes from. Why do we why on all the nights we can sit or recline, on this night we recline? Because we're free people. The Romans were the free people. We were the slaves under that time, under Roman occupation. We also, slaves or people that worked for the Romans, sat on benches with no backs. So you couldn't recline. But today, all of our chairs have backs to it. So, so there was a funny, we used to have seders growing up with like 40 or 50 people in a house that didn't hold more than 5. So, I mean, it was like this L-shaped dining room, living room, scenario. Is that all the furniture had to be moved to different parts of the houses, bring in all the tables, and everyone's like literally squeezed in. God forbid you had to go to the bathroom, would upset the entire thing. And so one time, to make it easier, my mother said, let's just bring in the park bench. And remember this whole argument. Well, no, you can't, because we had benches in Roman times, and we have to be able to recline. So we had a whole discussion. By the way, just so you know, I lost that argument. My mother won. So, anyways, let's continue. So he's got this thing about that. It refers, it refers to anyone who needs to celebrate Passover. Furthermore, the continuation of the statement in the Haggadah makes it clear that this is a reference to the festival, not the Pesach offering. This year, we're here meaning the diaspora. The Pesach offering could not be a sacrifice in the diaspora because we're not allowed to do that here. So the opening statement must be an invitation to celebrate Passover at a time when the Passover sacrifice was no longer offered. Why both statements are necessary? This is where it gets interesting. The invitation reminds us that we have 2 different types of obligations to the needy. According to halacha, we must provide food for those who are hungry without investigating their needs. If someone asks for food, we should not question him. We give him what he asks for. When it comes to less essential needs, we have a right to investigate if a person is really as needy as he said. So if someone says they need wine or matzah for Passover, we have to give it to them. One more note. If this is an invitation, why do we make the statement, all who are hungry, before the Kiddush, before we say the blessing on wine? If we're inviting everybody, why not do it right at the beginning? And the answer is, so if you know anything about traditional Jewish behavior, right, on Friday night, if the Shabbat is supposed to start at 6 o'clock, by 5:30, everyone is rushing around, trying to get everything set. So when Shabbat starts, it starts at 6. And how do we know that you have to have it start at a specific time? This is the ruling. The Kiddush must be recited at the very onset of the Sabbath or the holiday without any delay, in fulfillment of the statement, remember the Sabbath day, remember it as soon as it becomes. So remember, in the Torah, it says, V'shamru et Shabbat. We sing the song on Friday nights. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael. We sing that. But the rabbis take it one step farther and says, remember it as soon as it begins. It's not, so in traditional Judaism, if Shabbat starts at 6, the candles are lit at 6. That's why you'll see on some Jewish calendars, it'll say candle lighting time, 5:10, 6:10, depending whether it's daylight savings time or not. We find a similar statement in the Torah concerning the Passover in Exodus, chapter 13, verse 2. Remember the day on which you went forth from Egypt. The same principle must apply to both the festival and Sabbath. With regard to the Kiddush, we don't delay its recitation. What's more, we can't be sure if there will be needy people at our doorstep, so it would be impractical to delay the Kiddush while issue an invitation and wait for the needy to arrive. The participants recite the Kiddush as soon as the Seder begins, and only afterwards they issue an invitation to those who are hungry or needy to join them. So we know that we say the Kiddush first because as soon as the holiday starts, we're supposed to actually light the candles and say the blessing over wine, because it's that blessing over wine that sanctifies the day. You listen to Rabbi Maddel always said, this is the cup of joy on Friday night. That's basically how we sanctify the day. And if you look in the Kiddush itself, not the Borei Pri Hagafen, but the paragraph after that, on Friday night and on holidays, there's a reminder that it's either Shabbat or it's a holiday, reminds us of creation. So there's that part of it as well. Now, so we know that according to this Rabbi Epstein, we don't do, that we're talking about something that's today. And because we can't do the Passover sacrifice, it's not referring to that. And we have to give people what they need at a time that they need it. Yeah, the Shabbat before, not this past week, but 2 weeks ago, was what we call Shabbat Shekalim, where they start doing the census in the Torah. And what it is Shabbat Shekalim is, it's about 6 weeks before Passover, and it starts the collection for Passover charity. So it used to be that the rabbis would get up and say, "Okay, this is Shabbat Shekalim. Please donate so that we can make sure everyone has, wine and matzah and what they need for Passover." So that's part of that. That's something that we do already. It's become very much part of the Jewish calendar. But it goes on. All who are hungry, next year we're here. Next year in the land of Israel. Now we are slaves. May we be free. The opening statement of the Haggadah begins with 3 passages. This is the bread of haste. All who are hungry, now we are here. The first statement sets the stage for telling the Passover story. Is there a connection between the 2 invitations, all who are hungry and all who are needed? And the following 2 statements, there's 2 statements, now we are here, now we are slaves. In the Talmud Brachot, which is the section of the Talmud that sets the prayers, what it actually sets down what prayers we say, we learn that in Messianic times, the only thing that will change in the world is that there will no longer be political oppression of one nation by another. There will, however, still be poverty in the world. Some realities never change. These 2 statements make clear, even if we are in the land of Israel, we will still have to say, all who are hungry, come and eat, because the poor will not cease from the earth, which is in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 15:11. What will be different between the present era and the Messianic eras? Now we are slaves, but in the time to come, we will be free. These statements are also a roadmap to redemption. In another section of the Talmud of Baba Batra, it says, great is tzedakah because it will bring redemption to the world. We begin the story of redemption by bringing redemption of the world through acts of kindness and justice. The Talmud bases this statement on Isaiah chapter 56, verse 1. Observe justice and perform righteousness, tzedakah, for my salvation is soon to come. These statements also explain the connection between the second and third statements. Halach ma'anya, by performing acts of charity, all who are hungry, we gain merit to live in the land of Israel as free men and women. So this Rabbi Epstein is saying a couple of things. First of all, when you think about Messianic times, when the Messiah is going to come, or the end of days, however you want to call it, the interesting thing in the Talmud is we may have peace, but it's not going to we're still going to have poverty. That's that's a huge thing, because all of a sudden it's like everyone thinks that during a Messianic time, everyone's going to be, living, wonderfully. It's not true. I mean, if you look at a time where there's no poverty, you have to look in the 24th century in Star Trek, because in Star Trek, there is no poverty. They've eliminated poverty by eliminating money. So it's a whole interesting society at that time. But it's the only time I've actually seen it happen. The Talmud actually states, and apparently this paragraph, based on his interpretation, states that poverty is always going to be around. We're always going to have to ask people or see if people need something. And there's two things. One, people that don't have the money for matzah and wine, and people that may not be able to set up a table on their own. Maybe they have some of it, but they don't have all of it. Maybe they don't have silver or whatever. And we're supposed to kind of like either help them or invite them in. In our society, we don't just generically invite people into our home and hope someone will pop in, because that doesn't work in our homes anymore. If someone if someone knocked on your door and said, I need something to eat, what would you do? Is an interesting question just to ask in and of itself. But still, we are commanded to do that, but also realize that the righteousness that we bring to the world, or the tikkun olam that we bring to the world, is a constant thing, because there's always going to need people that need help. Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, then this particular thing, when he talks about when I talk about the history of matzah, the question is, did we have it in Egypt? Did we not? According to him, no, we only had it when we left Egypt. And now we have it as a symbol of that this is where we are. And the idea of this is where we are is so important. I find it to be important. There is a very, very Jewish concept that says, we're not too worried about, yes, God forbid people, when we pass away, we have Olam Haba. We get to go to Olam Haba. There's a place in the world to come. Does that, is it a heaven or whatever it is? But there's really no hell as far as we're concerned. But what our also concern is here today. this is where we have to do our, our tikkun olam. This is where we have to do things. It's not going to be, I always tell kids that you can get, mitzvah points in heaven. God will give you a mitzvah point if you do X, Y, and Z. But the idea is that there are no points in heaven. And that's the whole idea, that yes, we can bring redemption, so to speak, into the world, but that's like making the world a better place, not doing it because we think that we're going to, when we die, we're going to go, go into a heaven or hell. And I mean, there's so many issues in terms of Judaism where people go after, what in the afterlife. It's the whole last paragraph of the Talmud Sanhedrin deals with that. And it's kind of cute. And by the way, the answer to the Olam Haba, if you're ever curious, as a friend of mine, one of my best friends was a cantor who passed away many years ago, used to tell me that in heaven, there are 7 layers of heaven, 7 levels. The top level is like God's dining room, get to sit and study Torah with God. But he said there's a door that leads to each level. In each door, there's a question, and the answer has to be given musically. Only a cantor will tell you that. So I mean, everyone has their own different things, but the idea is that Passover is a holiday of here and now. We may remember our story, but we take our Jewish, we talk about our story, and our story. Not only did we leave Egypt, but my grandfather left southern Poland. My grandmother left Moscow. One grandmother left, also in other different areas, Odessa. I couldn't remember the name of this town. So but this, that's part of my story. Everyone has their own story. So that's really what Passover is about. So that was a little bit of matzah history. And I hope you could like that. I mean, we're going to do a couple other things on Passovers for the next few weeks. So, and if you have anything in particular you want to talk about, just kind of drop me a line. Let me know if there's something else that you want to deal with. But that's it, folks. That's my past history, matzah history thing for the day.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Folks, you have a good day and have a good week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.